As we all know, the core of our community is Limud Torah, Torah scholarship. In ways that we understand and ways that we don't, Torah is our life. In our community, we are extremely privileged to have one of the greatest Talmidei Chacham in America. For me personally, it is a tremendous privilege to be able to work together with the Rosh Kollel on a daily basis. There is no more appropriate way to begin our discussion tonight than by hearing some insightful words of Torah from the one who absolutely embodies Torah in everything he does, and in whose merit we all succeed. Please rise for Kavod Torah, the Rosh Kollel, Rav Chaim Simcha Gibber Shlita.
I think Rabbi Goldberger just threw me off balance. Distinguished Menahel, Rabbi Victor Goldberger, Rabbanim of our community, Rabbi Cheskel Greenberg, Rabbi Mordechai Kolaski, former alumni of the Kollel, Rabbi Chaim Goldberger, Rabbi Yosef Lowinger, future Rosh Chabur of the Kollel, looking forward excitingly to your coming, and we will hear more about you later on in the evening. Members of the Kollel, the eminent Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbi Yakon, the young adult outreach director, who brings the message of the Kollel to so many young adults, college students, in a way that is quite unusual and in a way that is so effective. Mazel tov and welcome to Rabbi Adam Crystal upon completing your first year in the Kollel, the administrative part of the Kollel. You have joined the administrative side of the Kollel, and you have worked tirelessly with great effort for the enhancement and the betterment of everything that goes on in the Kollel. Esteemed honorees, Rabbi and Mrs. Ari Khan, Mr. and Mrs. Moshe Shimon Vorotinov, Dr. Georgie Teverovsky. Welcome to our board of directors, and welcome to our supporters and to all of our guests. Before I begin, I just want to thank our Kollel Light for all that they do, for all that they represent. And to all that they mean to me personally. At the very same time, I want to acknowledge the esteemed Neshei HaKollel, the dedicated wives of our rabbinic faculty, for everything that they do. And making everything a success and making everything possible. And of course, I want to thank my own wife for everything that she does for me, and for everything and for everything that she means to me, and for everything she does for the community. Before beginning, I must also acknowledge once again and thank Rabbi Avigdor Goldberger, our new Menahel and director, who has thrust himself into the administrative and development side of the Kollel, and has accomplished great things. He has a phenomenal personality, a person who can make friends and develop relationships, a man of multiple talents. And besides everything else, this dinner between him and Rabbi Crystal went flawlessly and beautifully, and everything is a direct, it is directly because of the efforts that they put into this event. The phrase that epitomizes what the Kollel represents is the study of Torah, Limud HaTorah. A Kollel is an institution where young Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, Talmudic scholars pursue their studies on an advanced level. A community Kollel is that plus a component of outreach, when we invite the entire community to join us, to be a part of the process, to come and learn with us, let us develop classes, and let us continue this relationship. It is for the for the beginner, the newcomer, the novice, and it extends all the way over to the accomplished Talmid Chacham and everybody in between. All are welcome, all are valued, and we want to share the Torah that we learn with you, and we want you to be a part of our process. Yesterday's Parsha talks about, in a large measure, the Tochacha, which is a frightening depiction of the events of Jewish history that may turn sour if and when the Jewish people stray and drift from the path of Hashem and mitzvahs. It is a very sobering picture, but it didn't start, and we are told in the Medrash and the Gemara, the Ramban and others, that these events that are depicted in the Torah were actual events that occurred in the times of destruction of the first temple and the second temple. And that's when these events came to fruition. Rashi tells us that the reason that we became detached and disenfranchised from Hashem started with humble beginnings. It started with the fact that we were not studying Torah. And because we did not study Torah, one step led to the next, and ultimately we came to the point where even the existence of Hashem himself, of God himself, was a question in the minds of people, and therefore that attachment became so ruinous for the Jewish people that the events of the Tochacha come to pass. The slippery slope of detaching ourselves and disengaging ourselves from Hashem and from Yiddishkeit is when we stop learning Torah. Limud Torah, the learning of Torah, is the lifeblood of the Jewish people. It is the waters that refresh the Jewish soul. It is the energy that gives meaning to the mundane events of life. Without Torah, we stray off course. With Torah, we are on course with Hashem, directly following Him and going with Him. But without that, we wander aimlessly and hopelessly in a world that is becoming more and more hostile. So the more we connect with learning Torah, the more we connect with Hashem. And the more we connect with Hashem, the more He connects with us. We are living in what might be considered frightening times for the Jewish people. I would like to share with you a news item from 2 weeks ago. It was Wednesday, May the 25th. On that day, the United Nations World Health Organization, which convened its annual assembly in Geneva, and just for a moment, the World Health Organization is an organization that monitors the health conditions of nations around the globe. And it records and monitors the abuses of health conditions. And on that day, they issued a statement. The World Health Organization, the arm of the United Nations. And in that statement, they singled out one country among the approximately 200 countries in the world today for abuses in physical health, in mental health, and in environmental health. And that country was none other than Israel. Now, this is incredible and absurd on multiple levels. Number one, it's simply not true. Number two is that the opposite is true. That it is well known that there are Syrians who are coming across the border on a regular basis to be treated in Israeli hospitals because they know they get the best treatment there. Israel is the only country in the entire region that promotes and respects the health of all nations and all peoples. Israel, in fact, bends over backwards, and sometimes absurdly, to make a statement that they are trying to treat everybody fairly. And it is well known, and has come to light recently, that the Israeli ambulance corps, the Magen David Adom, has directions, the medics have directions, that when they arrive at a scene where there was a terrorist bombing or some other type of injury that occurred, their directions are that the person who is hurt the most, whose health is failing the most, is the one that gets the immediate attention first. And even if the terrorist is the one whose life is on the line immediately, and the victims who are lying on the ground are not as bad at that particular moment as the terrorist gets first attention. Now, that may seem absurd to you, and you're probably not the only ones who think so, but that is in fact the directives that the ambulance corps, the Magen David Adom, have in Israel. They bend over backwards to do things to help people so that they should never be accused of only catering to their own. And therefore, it's utterly not true, that the opposite is true about the health care that is given in Israel. Number 3, the real abuses, which are truly abuses that occur in many nations throughout the world, were not reported, were not recorded, were not censured on that same day. Syria has killed 200,000 of its own citizenry. The Saudis have withheld water and food from 1 million Yemenis. What about Russia, Cuba, China, Venezuela, a host of other nations? None of them were cited for any abuses. The only one that was cited for health abuses against other people was Israel. And the fourth thing that makes this absurd is that what were the numbers? How did they tally up? What was the tally on the vote? It was 107 against Israel, with 8 supporting Israel. But of the 8, Israel was one of the 8, so there was 7 supporting Israel, and 8 abstentions. And who were the 8? The 8 were the United States, Canada, Australia, and Israel, we said, and then 4 others. And the other 4 were Paraguay, Guatemala, right, Micronesia, and Papua New Guinea. These are the other 4 that were against, that were on Israel's side. There was no England, there was no France, there was not a single member of the European Union that sided with Israel. However, this is not new. And let me share another item on the United Nations agenda with you. The United Nations General Assembly in 2015 adopted in total 23 resolutions against various countries. Of the 200 countries in the world, there were 23 resolutions. Of the 23, 20 were against Israel, and 3 against the rest of the 3 total against the other nations in the world. And I looked at all 20 resolutions against Israel, and there was never more than 8 countries that sided with Israel, against over 100 that were against Israel in each case. And there were 2 instances where Israel was the only one that sided with itself, and there was not a single nation that sided with it. But maybe you'll say, but these are the major nations, these are the strong nations, these are the powerful nations that sided with Israel. Maybe so, some of them were, United States, Canada, Australia maybe. But for the most part, 4 of these nations, which were often represented the majority of those that sided with Israel, were other nations. And let me provide some perspective here. Micronesia was on Israel's side. Micronesia has a total population of 108,000. This is an island nation in the South Pacific with 108,000 people. The Marshall Islands sided with Israel. They have 43,000 people, approximately the same population as St. Louis Park. Palau, I had to look up how to pronounce that one. Palau is also an island nation in the South Pacific, which has a total population of only 15,000. They sided with Israel. And the next one was the hardest to pronounce, was Nauru, which has the distinct distinction that it is the only country in the world, besides the Vatican City, that doesn't have a capital, because it is its capital. It has 8,000 people. If you take these 4 nations, which are the majority of the nations that are siding with Israel on most of these issues, they don't total up to the population of St. Paul. That's 4 of the nations. And then the other 4 are the larger nations. Or the 3 sometimes. The other 3. So let me ask you, does this seem rational to you? Does it make any sense? I would submit to you that this is so irrational, so senseless, that it begs a different type of explanation. It seems clear that we are receiving a message from Hashem. The Rambam writes, in connection with yesterday's Parsha, that when world events turn against the Jewish people, so it is really a statement from Hashem that he is trying to grab our attention, to make us aware that we can't put our faith in anybody else. We must place our faith in him. It is his way of conveying that message to us. And here too, it is so irrational, so senseless, it makes no sense. It must be that it's a message from Hashem. So what is our response? What is our response to this? Our response is to reverse the trend. But how do we reverse the trend? First of all, we have to become aware and internalize this awareness that everything that happens in the world is coming to us because Hashem has orchestrated it. And the way to establish that knowledge within our own minds is to start to learn Torah. And just like learning Torah was the first step in the wrong direction, the abandonment of Torah study was the first step to ultimately the complete detachment and disengagement from Hashem. The opposite will be true if we want to engage with Hashem and attach ourselves to Hashem. So when we study Torah, step by step, it brings us closer and closer and closer. And that is the process that we need. That is the process, the one we can all gain from intensifying our Torah study, qualitatively, quantitatively, making it better, inviting others to join us. This is what our response has to be to an otherwise irrational world that is looking at Israel as the source of all problems on the globe. Our response has to be the study of Torah, and that will bring us closer to Hashem. And I want to end with a bracha that may we all live to witness the day described by the prophet Yeshayahu, Ki mola hearts deus Hashem kamaim layom mechasim. When let that special day and that epic of history arrive, when the earth will be filled with knowledge of Hashem, that will be so ubiquitous and so abundant as the waters that cover the ocean floor. Thank you.